Murphy, he's really relentless. He's straightforward. He's going to get the job done. You tell him what you want, he's going to make sure that he gets it done and make sure that other people know what you want.
Billy Murphy is a very direct person, which I appreciate. I like that when you ask him a question, he's very honest with you. He doesn't sugarcoat it. And I felt like he fought for our family, and he truly believed the wrong that was done against my cousin needed to have some type of justice in the civil court. Regardless of how they got it done, they did it in a way that was effective, respectful of our family.
Billy Murphy Jr. is one of a handful of great American trial lawyers who have successfully fought for truth and justice against all odds in the legal arena. His cases in his career sought to uncover the real drama in people's stories and cover the issues that promote justice and fairness for injured persons, safeguards victims' rights, and the opportunity to help guide the hands of justice, especially when people's lives have been destroyed, families ruined, dreams lost, or widespread societal change and reform are needed. He eloquently describes to juries the stories of unimaginable pain, suffering, and great wrongs, as well as the courage and faith and the dauntlessness of the human spirit. His cases are truly personal crusades and telling journeys of what it means to seek justice in an American courtroom.
The great Langston Hughes once said, "Hold fast to your dreams, because if dreams die, life is like a broken-winged bird which cannot fly." And I believe that. It is so important that we be strong, fearless advocates for our clients and their lives, their ability to thrive and survive. It's amazing how many problems people have. And these problems are often more difficult than they can handle alone. Helping people just turned me on so tremendously that I felt like Willie Mays when he played center field. He said, "Why do they pay me to do this? This is so much fun." It's really, really, really something you can fall in love with. The more you help people, the better you feel about yourself. You feel better about the world because people respond so wonderfully to being helped. And that response just gives you more and more energy and more love for what you do.
He's successful because he possesses, by instinct and sheer brilliance, traits of some of the best trial lawyers in American legal history. Patrick Henry, John Jay, John Marshall, Daniel Webster, Abraham Lincoln, Stephen Douglas, Clarence Darrow. Knowledge of the law is often not as important to the criminal lawyer as dramatic ability and knowledge of human nature. Those rare criminal defense and civil trial lawyers, like Billy, must also be good psychologists and good actors. Although his criminal cases brought him fame, his extensive and record-setting verdicts in his civil practice has made him wealthy. It has proven to be a very profitable combination. Why? Because juries are just spellbound by Billy Murphy Jr. A seasoned trial lawyer of 40-plus years in practice, Judge William H. Billy Murphy Jr. aggressively and effectively advocates for clients from all backgrounds and walks of life. An expert litigator, calm and collected, he prides himself on getting to the truth through imaginative leadership and creative team building, battling the powerful to protect the rights of the innocent, unparalleled at cross-examining witnesses. He commands every twist and turn in the courtroom and out-strategizing and outworking other lawyers time and time again to secure positive verdicts in very challenging cases. After graduating from the University of Maryland Law School, he built a thriving practice as a high-profile criminal defense attorney, defending fight promoter Don King and the First Amendment rights of a controversial Black Panther Party newspaper. In 2015, he served as attorney for the family of Freddie Gray, who died during an encounter with the Baltimore police. And he also secured the largest single defendant settlement in Maryland history, winning $185 million against Ernst & Young. His awards and accolades are too many to list, but he received the coveted Clarence Darrow Award for Mass Torts Made Perfect in 2012, the Thurgood Marshall Lifetime Achievement Award in 2003 and the Charles Hamilton Houston Award for Lifetime Achievement in Litigation in 2004. He is considered by his peers to be extraordinarily gifted and one of the best criminal defense and civil trial lawyers of his time. In this special edition of Justice in America Network TV series, our news team sits down with Billy and his client James Turtle Wells Jr. to discuss what went on behind closed doors when he represented him in the largest bank robbery in Maryland history, and how a corrupt FBI agent at the direction of the infamous and corrupt FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover offered bribes to Billy to corrupt justice. You'll meet James Turtle Wells Jr., who after serving many years in prison has redeemed himself, earned a degree in psychology, authored 5 books, and has been counseling and tutoring at-risk kids for the last 15 years. His story is a true story of the power of rehabilitation and redemption. As the famous Irish writer Oscar Wilde once wrote, "Every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future." This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Baltimore. It is my great pleasure to introduce Billy Murphy Jr. to the show. Welcome to the show, Billy.
Nice to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about your law firm.
We have the oldest black-owned firm in the nation. It's a minority firm, actually, because one of our founding partners is Latino. And I grew up in the projects, and I saw firsthand how black people were treated by the police, and it was ugly. And I also became the victim of police brutality when I was in law school. I got arrested for absolutely nothing and I had to go to trial and accepted a verdict of probation before judgment because the judge didn't acquit people who criticized the police or spoke out against them. Then the riots occurred after Martin Luther King, and I helped my father, who was a lawyer, who later became a judge for 34 years in Maryland, who was representing all of these people who were locked up in the aftermath of the uprising. And so all of that conspired to make me want to be a criminal lawyer. And I had a firsthand understanding of how unjust the system was and still is. And so I'd rather have people, my philosophy was, my client's a child of God, everybody else is a son of a bitch. And I'd rather have them punished by their mother rather than the so-called criminal justice system. As Richard Pryor put it, it's not justice, it's just us. And that's still going on. The latest survey by the federal judiciary, using its own data, is that in the federal system, black people get 20% higher sentences, factor for factor, than everybody else. Latinos are not far behind. There's a new study that shows that Latinos now are getting the most injustice out of the system. And so there's a lot to fight about, and it won't be over in my lifetime, that's for sure.
Yeah, and when I think about it, you know, I mean, you win a lot of battles, and sometimes you get big verdicts, which is supposed to hurt the defendant who has to pay them. But it seems that the culture doesn't change, right?
Well, there are two different cultures. There's the police culture in the criminal side of the law, and then there's the hospital culture over here in the personal injury side of the law. And hospitals are complicated organizations that have difficulties managing themselves in a way that can prevent malpractice. We represent one of the best of the hospital systems in Maryland, the University of Maryland hospital system. They're excellent. But when you look around at the landscape, too much medical malpractice, too little concern about it, and the system hasn't redesigned itself to prevent it. 90% of all medical malpractice is unreported. It gets swept under the rug. People don't realize it.
And so it's a big battle.
Yeah, we are here today. We're going to be talking about one of your most famous cases, biggest bank robbery in Maryland, right?
Yes.
Tell our audience a little bit about the case and your client.
It was a robbery that took place in the early hours of the morning at a bank that was the payroll drop for Westinghouse. So it had a huge amount of money. And these guys knew exactly the schedule of every employee, and they had a 12-minute window to accomplish the robbery. They tied up the first 4 employees who showed up, first 5, and put others in safekeeping inside the bank so they wouldn't interfere, and calmly took $547,000 cash from the bank. The FBI immediately knew who they were. They arrested one of them, James Wells, within a month after the robbery. And he had made one mistake. He left the tags of the neckties that he used to tie the people up on the neckties. And those tags could be traced back to his grandfather's cleaning shop. And there were others who testified at the grand jury against him about his role in the robbery, and he was subsequently charged with the robbery. He was not identified in the lineup, which helped a lot, and he did not make any statements to the police, which also helped. But they had a pretty strong case against him anyway. Now the other, William Sonny Jackson, thought that he was in the clear, even though he directly participated, and he told his wife to let the FBI search because he knew that they were going to come for him. She consented to the search, but the problem is Sonny left a sawed-off shotgun in the ceiling of his house. That's a 30-year penalty all by itself. And so now both men are now behind bars. But I knew something that the FBI didn't want me to know, and that is they were desperate to find the money. They couldn't find it. J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the Bureau at the time. He was not only a racist, but he was a lot of other things too. Evil man. And so he intimidated these agents to go out and find the money, or else they'd be transferred to Alaska or kicked out of the Bureau. Well, that was the way he operated. And so everybody was nervous. You could feel it when you talked to the agents. One of the agents offered me a bribe. He said, if you will secretly tell us where that money is, of course, I didn't know where it was, but he made the bribe offer. If you would secretly tell us where that money is, we'll give you the $50,000 reward. I told him to kiss my butt. And then he came back the next day and offered it to my clients. And I said, are you crazy? You're asking, you believe they did it. You believe they had $547,000, and you expect them to take a $50,000 reward and give you the money. And so we made a deal around 2 o'clock in the morning because they moved one client to the same jail as the other.
I was going to ask you about that when I read that. Why 2 o'clock in the morning?
Well, they didn't want it to be known.
I mean, you went down to the jail.
They were desperate to get the money because Hoover was putting so much pressure on them. And so when the dust cleared, I negotiated that they only had to give them back $300,000 of the money. And that Turtle would get a 2-year recommendation for bank larceny, not bank robbery, and that Sonny's charges would be dismissed altogether. And he was on parole, and the government agreed to send a letter recommending, which was not binding, of course, to the parole board that his parole not be violated.
Right, and let me stop you there because you made that agreement with the FBI agent.
Yes.
But why did they agree to letting the people who stole the money, your clients, why did they allow them to keep $240,000? Because they just wanted some money back?
The reason that they took $300,000 was because that's all I knew about. I didn't know about where the rest of it was, and I didn't know where the 300 was until my client told me. And so that was it, take it or leave it. And they were under such pressure that they took it. And then they lied about it. They said that they'd gotten 400,000. Actually, they got less than 300. And when the covers got kicked off, the Bureau was embarrassed. And the head of the FBI for Maryland was fired. The head of the bank robbery squad, was forced to retire.
What happened to that agreement?
Well, I made him sign an agreement in my handwriting. I made him initial every page. It was a 2-page agreement with all the conditions. And I knew what the FBI was capable of doing back then. They would do what's called a black bag job. Today they call it a sneak and peek search. It's where you go in somebody's office or their house and leave nothing disturbed except what you find that you're looking for. So you'll never know that they were in your office. And so I knew they would do that to me.
That they would come into your office?
That they would come into my office and late at night and search my office for that agreement without a warrant. So I left a note on my desk. If you're reading this note, you're a bigger criminal than you're accusing my client of being. And you won't find what you're looking for because it's been photocopied and distributed to various parts of the country. Have a nice day. The next day, the agent came to me. He met me in the lobby. I didn't know he was going to be there. And he said, "Nice note, Murph."
But eventually, the prosecuting attorney decided that they weren't going to honor this agreement, right?
Well, they didn't have to. It was between us and the FBI. But when my client said that, we're not going to show you the money unless you honor the agreement, they honored the agreement. The problem is that the judge didn't want to honor the agreement. He wasn't a party to it. So he could do what he wanted to do. And so Turtle ended up serving 23 months in jail. And Sonny ended up getting a violation of parole, but they were both thrilled with the deal nonetheless, for obvious reasons.
Now, this story is like in 2 parts because they got off easy through your master work, but then when they got out, what happened?
Unfortunately, they went back to doing the same thing. And so they got caught in a jewelry store robbery. The silent alarm was triggered by one of the employees, and so the police were in the back of the jewelry store and in the front of the jewelry store. So they took a hostage, and it was a 3-county chase, and a sharpshooter, police sharpshooter, lost his patience and tried to kill Sonny with 1 shot. The bullet grazed Sonny's cheek. He still has the scar there to this day, and hit the hostage and killed the hostage. And so they were charged with felony murder, meaning any killing in the commission of a felony can be attributed to the felons. And they got a life sentence. Turtle was released about 20 months ago. Sonny was released about 3.5, 4 years ago.
We have a Turtle with us today, and we're going to bring him on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce James Turtle Wells Jr. to the show. Welcome to the show, Turtle.
Thank you.
You're an amazing individual because you've done what a lot of people are incapable of doing, and that is you have redeemed yourself. You're a changed man. You went into prison, unfortunate event, someone died, you were in prison for 43 years, and while you were in prison, what did you and how did you change the way you are today?
Well, I went to prison, and one of the things I wanted to do was change my life, change my outlook on life. So I wanted to do something that my family would be proud of, as opposed to embarrassing them all the time. So I started going to school and to learn how to read and write, because I always knew I was going to write a book. And so I went to school, first obtained my 8th grade certificate, then I acquired my GED. I have an AA degree from Essex Community College, and I have a BS degree from Coppin State University.
And that's in psychology, correct?
Yes, and I graduated on the Dean's List. Afterwards, I wanted to give something back. So I joined a number of programs in different institutions, talking to at-risk kids and young inmates, and just trying to help them so they won't make the same decisions poor decisions that I made in my life.
Now, you've been doing that for the last 15 years, haven't you?
I was in prison, as I say, 43 years. I've been counseling average kids for at least 30 years in a number of organizations, self-help programs in a number of institutions in the state of Maryland.
What do you tell them?
First, I talk to them so they can see that I'm genuine, and then find out what their problem is. Some got problems with authority, some have problems with drugs, some have been misused and abused. So, and then, main thing is, what do they want out of life? And so then we'll go on from there, and then I tell them about myself and some of the things that happened to me, and let them know that be a better person than me.
Right. Would you say, in being on the ground level, in mentoring and trying to help other people who started out in the same path with you, that many of them think that is their fate anyway? They can't change it? Do you come across that a lot?
We're talking about culture. And culture is very important. But a lot of things about culture is that's the way they see things. That's the way they deal with psychologically, how they deal with what's right or wrong. So I think that a lot of kids, once you explain things to them, I think they can make better choices themselves. But you have to thoroughly explain it to them.
They don't like the life that they're headed down while they're in prison, do they?
No, most don't. But I'm saying some. So you got to realize is some kids or some young inmates you can deter. You can actually change. Some, it's too late. They're gonna have to experience maybe more, and it's up to the individual and what they want out of life.
Right. Now, while you were in prison, you wrote 5 books. Is that correct?
Yes, I wrote 5 books. My first book was Narrow Vision about.
And you have that with you. You have that. Can you hold it up there, please?
This is Narrow Vision. It's about bank robbery, the largest bank robbery in history during that time.
Is that about your time being a bank robber, or what?
This is my time being a bank robber, armed robber, misguided.
Going back to those days, what, there's an old saying, why, I think they asked, who was it, Willie Sutton or something like that, why did you rob banks? And he says, that's because that's where the money was. What was your mentality? What was your mindset in those days? I mean, you had an accomplice. You had cased this bank for 6 months. You knew everything going down, right? You wanted, is it the easy way out? Is that what you were looking to do?
Well, there's no money like armed robbery money. Because armed robbery money, 3-6 minutes, you can be a millionaire or more.
When you're planning a bank robbery like that, did you ever consider the consequences if you got caught, or did you think you would never get caught?
To tell you the truth, that was one of the things that, looking at myself years later, I never thought about the consequences of my actions. I always thought about the money.
When you were arrested, was it correct about a month? Was it a month or soon thereafter? Were you able to enjoy some of the money?
Oh yes, I enjoyed some things. I had the same habits most hustlers have. Like to dress nice, chase the girls, use drugs, dress flamboyantly, drive a nice car.
Were there ever times where you had 43 years, not for this crime, but later when you were sentenced to jail again? Were there many nights when you lied awake and said to yourself, wow, these are the consequences, I shouldn't have done that?
Oh yes, that's, you think about the consequences, especially as you evolve and as a man, as an individual. You tend to look back and revisit your past life. And it's all about, for me, it was all about bettering myself, preparing myself. Right. And just trying to be a better person, a better human being.
Turtle is being way too modest.
Is he?
Yes, he's helped over 6,000 inmates in the 20-some years, 30 years that he's been helping people in the penitentiary and other prisons in Maryland. Without his guidance, many of those people would recidivize and go back to jail. And you can't convince everybody, but he's convinced an enormous number of people to avoid a life of crime. He was so good at it that the white employees in the jail would bring their problem children to talk to her.
Kind of like scared straight.
Yeah.
You know, there's an old saying, some men find their destiny on the road they took to avoid it. And you certainly have, right?
Thank you. Yes.
You have another book there. What is that book?
This is a 1-2 series. That was about the bank robbery. This is Everything Must Change.
And what does that title mean?
Everything must change, man. You change our outlook on life, the way we do things, and I don't know. When I was writing this book, I was changing. I was going through a transformation. I was evolving, and I was becoming I believe, a better individual, and so I wrote about it and told the stories and my ups and downs while in prison, losing family members. It's a humanistic story about loved ones. It has some humor in there, but it also has some things that make you cry, you know, some things that make you laugh. But it's just going through your transformation.
You, because of your story, you told me before the show that you would like to speak, right?
Yes.
Various groups. Tell our audience a little bit about those aspirations.
Kids. I think they make a lot of bad decisions. I find that a lot of young male that's come inside juvenile facilities and adult facilities, a lot of them don't have great male role models. And I think that if you catch them young, you can change them. So I believe that through my evolution, that where I'm at now, at this juncture in my life, I think I was supposed to be getting something back. So I go and try to talk to juveniles. I'm a former drug user, so I've spoken in a couple of drug facilities, and I go anywhere to tell my stories. People contact me to speak. So and I'm waiting for more to contact.
Yeah, you have an amazing story, and I hope by the broadcast of this show, more and more people will contact you to tell your story. One last question. Talk about your spirituality, how that grew inside of you.
In 1998, I had a dirty urine. And during my time that I was on lockup, I always wanted to be a Muslim. I wanted to follow the Sunnah. And I was around a lot of men that followed the Sunnah. And so I asked my Lord, I took my Shahada, and I asked my Lord to take the taste of that heroin out of my system. Because even if I were blessed enough to go home, I would be right back because of my usage of heroin. So slowly but surely, the thoughts about it, the feeling about it left me. I became more engulfed into my religion, Al-Islam, and they say that Al-Islam say you're supposed to be able to look at the individual, not because he has a kufi on or he has a long jalabia, but you're supposed to be able to see it in his character. So I'm hoping that when people look at me today, whether I have my kufi on or my jalabia, that they see a different person, a better person. I like who I am today.
They do, I do. And I am very honored to have you on this show because, like I said, you are a rarity amongst mankind. You've seen the dark side, and you're on the bright side now. And thank you very much for being on the show.
Again, thank you for having me.
We hear a lot about what you should or shouldn't do if you get stopped by the police or get accused of a crime. As probably one of the best-known criminal defense lawyers in the United States today, and having defended a lot of people, whether they were guilty or innocent or whatever, what do you want to tell the audience about if you're ever arrested by the police, what you should do?
Well, I used to keep a picture behind my desk of a big fish with a hook in his mouth. I said, that's what happens when you open your mouth. You should not say anything. until you get a lawyer, and you tell what happened to that lawyer, and he will properly advise you about what your rights are, and you should act accordingly. You should not run to the police and confess. You shouldn't send your child in and say, Junior, tell this man the truth now. Did you do this? And I see parents do this all the time. It's crazy. I made a movie with another organization called The 10 Rules for Dealing with the Police.
And what are some of those rules?
First of all, don't make any statements. Don't consent to any searches. Don't let them in your house, because then they, more often than not, feel the liberty to look everywhere they want for any reason they want. Those are the 3 basic rules. And be polite and courteous to these officers. They have a hard job. The best of them do their job well. Don't give them unnecessary guff or lip. Be polite. Treat them with respect. Because the sad truth is, if you don't, you may get a bullet. You may get a bullet even if you're respectful. If you make what they consider to be a sudden gesture in your car, they may shoot you. And they come to you at night, when they stop you at night, with their guns drawn, fingers on the trigger. And so you've got to be exceptionally careful. As a matter of fact, we try to teach every parent, every black parent, every poor white parent, every Latino parent, how to train your children so they will not be the victim of unnecessary police brutality. So that's what we try to do. It's called the 10 Rules for Dealing with the Police.
Keep up the good work and keep doing what you do. And thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.